The film begins in New York City, where John Wick and his pit bull have taken asylum with the Bowery Lord. John is punching a board until his knuckles bleed and BK comes in to inquire as to whether he is all set after the high table. John just says no doubt. John goes to Morocco, where he pursues men working for the senior riding a horse. In the wake of killing those men, John faces the senior for his ring. However, John is informed that the ring is gone. John then, at that point, continues to execute the senior prior to leaving. Back in New York, Winston and Sharon are summoned by the Harbinger to meet the Marquis de Graymont, who was sent by the high table. They have learned of the senior's execution, and the Marquis censures Winston for neglecting to kill John. Subsequently, the Marquis has the New York mainland denounced and exploded. Winston is considered excommunicado, and to focus on it more profound, the Marquis shoots Sharon in the chest. Winston stays by his companion's side as he bites the dust, saying it ought to have been him. In Paris, a visually impaired professional killer named Cain is remaining in the recreation area as his little girl, Mia, is playing the violin in the recreation area. Cain is called upon by the Marquis to pursue John. Cain says he is resigned, yet the Marquis undermines Maya's life, assuming that Cain rejects the sets of the Great Table. John heads to the Osaka mainland, oversaw by his close buddy, Shimazu Kyoji, where his little girl, Akira, is his attendant. Kyoji meets with John on the rooftop, consenting to give him safe haven stealthily. Despite the fact that Akira has no faith in John being there. Before long, the Marquis' right-hand man, Chitty, shows up with his hit crew trying to bait John out. Kyoji's own men appear and go head-to-head against the high-table professional killers by terminating bolts in the dimness. At the point when the contract killers come to the rooftop, John snatches his firearm and begins to do what he specializes in. While Koji's gatekeepers can fend off the greater part of the Great Table assassins, Cain shows up and starts his own body count laying out snares to assist him with hearing where his objectives are moving prior to utilizing his blade and firearm to kill the men. In the meantime, Akira joins the battle and executes a portion of Chitty's men, yet she winds up having Chance and injured. John assists her and Koji with getting out while he keeps on battling more men, incorporating taking out a few with a couple of nunchucks. He is found by Cain, the two of them viewing each other as former friends. So Cain is reluctant to go after John, but does so for the sake of Mia. John and Cain briefly fight before John manages to get away. In the middle of the gunfights, a tracker, Mr. Nobody, and his German shepherd are nearby, and he kills some of the gunmen going after John. He wants the contract on John's head too, but he claims that the current hit $20 million is not enough, so he is currently helping John as Koji and Akira are running out. They encounter Cain. He and Koji are also old friends, but Koji refuses to allow Cain to go after John, so they engage in a sword duel. When it appears that Koji is allowed to walk away, he keeps up the fight until Cain delivers a fatal blow. Akira holds her father's body as he dies in attempts to grab his sword to kill Cain, but he advises her against it so that she does not suffer the same fate as her father, and he tells her he will see her again. Akira goes to the train station where she finds John, blaming him for her father's death. She tells him to kill Cain, or she will. Winston meets with Bowery King as they both know them still being close to John makes them targets. Meanwhile, the Harbinger talks to the Marquis over the unnecessary bloodshed at the Osaka Continental. But the Marquis says it is necessary to not only kill John Wick, but to destroy the idea of him as an untouchable and unkillable figure. The Marquis is then visited by Mr. Nobody, who demands a $23 million contract for killing John. The Marquis responds by impaling his hand, and forcing him to choose either pulling the knife out or pulling his hand out to see where his ambitions lie. Mr. Nobody pulls his hand out, cutting between his fingers, and the Marquis agrees. John meets Winston at Karen's tomb, offering his condolences for the loss of his friend. Winston wants to get back at the Marquis, so he tells John that in order to win his freedom from the High Table, he must challenge the Marquis to a duel, even though it is believed that High Table duels were only myths. The only people who can support John in his endeavor is his family. But the Rosque Romea tore his ticket and severed ties with him. Seeing no other way, John agrees to seek them out. John travels to the Rosque Romea in Berlin, where he is greeted with a shotgun blast by the priest before he is tied up with a noose around his neck. He is met by his adoptive sister, Kadea, who is angry with John because his killing of the elder led the Marquis to order the execution of her father, Piotr, who would have approved of John in the duel. John offers to help Keisha to redeem himself, and she orders him to go after a German High Table member named Killa, the man who killed her father. John goes to Killa's nightclub, where Kane and Mr. Nobody are also there after tracking John down. The three sit for a card game with Killa, where Killa cheats before having his men go after the three assassins. While Kane and Nobody hold their own against the thugs, John goes after Killa throughout the club in the midst of oblivious clubgoers. John slices Killa's neck with a card and fights him, though Killa uses his strength and weight against John. Killa's men go after John and meet predictably bloody ends. Killa pushes John over a balcony, but it is not enough to stop him. John eventually corners Killa and knocks him over a stairway, sending him falling until he smashes headfirst onto the ground, killing him. John then takes one of Killa's gold teeth as proof of his death and brings it to Kavia, who reacts approvingly and helps John undergo the ceremony where he is branded with the family's crest and given support for the duel. Winston visits the Marquis with the official challenge document from John for the duel. Despite the Marquis trying to refuse, Winston reminds him that he is still bound to the High Table and its customs, so he must go through with it. In addition, Winston demands that if John wins, Winston will no longer be excommunicado, and his Continental will be uncondemned and rebuilt as it were, with his management reinstated. However, the Marquis reminds Winston that he will be John's second. So if John dies, so will he. John arrives to sit down with the Marquis as the Harbinger presides over them to discuss the conditions of the duel. They will meet at the Sacre-Cœur in Paris at sunrise and will duel with guns. If either of them fails to show up before the deadline, it will be an automatic forfeiture and grounds for execution. Kane will be the Marquis's second, and he agrees to allow him and his daughter free if he can kill John. John goes to a church where he sits to pay tribute to Helen. Kane meets him there in a friendly manner, telling him about Mia and what he has to lose. John later meets with Winston and Bowery King, the latter giving him a new gun and bulletproof suit. The Harbinger reminds the Marquis of what would happen within the High Table if he were killed by John. To ensure that John does not make it to the Sacre-Cœur on time, the Marquis deploys Chitty and his thugs to go after him. A radio DJ also announced to other listening assassins that the bounty on John is set for anyone who can kill him before sunrise. As John makes his way to the Sacre-Cœur, scores of assassins go after him. He faces off against gunmen in the streets, even getting into the traffic around the Arc de Triomphe, shooting the bad guys or letting them get hit by cars. The High Table keeps track of his whereabouts, leading to more assassins going after him. John enters a warehouse full of bad guys and fires explosive rounds at them. At the same time, Nobody helps take out some of the assassins and contacts the Marquis, demanding a higher payment. The Marquis ultimately agrees to a $40 million contract, luring out more desperate hitmen. John finally makes it to the steps leading up to the Saker Core, killing several more assassins before Chitty shows up and knocks him all the way back down the steps. Kane shows up to help John get to the top, helping him kill Chitty's guys. Nobody arrives as well, fighting Chitty because he threw his dog into traffic. With John's help, Chitty is brought down. The dog bites him in the balls, and nobody puts a bullet in his head. For good measure, the dog also pees on Chitty's face. John makes it mere moments before the sun rises. He and Kane grab their pistol as they engage in an old-fashioned duel. Both manage to hit each other twice. On the third round, Kane shoots John in the gun doesn't fire. The Marquis then orders that he claim the coup de grace so that he may be the one to kill John Wick. He grabs his gun and aims for John before Winston tells him he's an arrogant asshole and reminds him John didn't fire his last round. The Marquis realizes this too late before John blows his brains out. The Harbinger then declares that both John and Kane are free from their obligations to the High Table. John goes back down the steps and briefly thinks about Helen, saying her name before he slumps over. John Wick dies a free man. Winston and Bowery King bury John next to Helen with his tombstone, reading loving husband as he requested. Vic asks Winston if he thinks John is in heaven or hell, to which Winston replies, "Who knows?" The two walk away with BK, continuing to look after John's dog.